Hey, thank you for checking out this video. In this episode of Class Data Play, we are going to be looking at the GitOps Report 2025. Another topic is Know Your Kubernetes API protocols. And the third one is all about really the decisions that you make in terms of the type of technology that you choose, how that projects into the future, and whether you're actually making the right choices when you're evaluating technologies. All of that and lots more in this episode. Check it out. Hello and welcome. My name is Richard Simon. I am Cloud Therapist. This is the August 2025 episode of Cloud State of Play. So my regular guest, the lovely Paul Bevan, is still away on his rather extended break, it seems. Good for him, actually, I'd say. Great if you can get it, Paul, so I think you're doing well. So while the cat is still away, we, the mice, will continue to play. So for this month, I've the absolute pleasure of inviting Steve Fenton from Octopus Deploy as my guest. I met Steve in person only recently, actually, Platform Con, London. So yeah, that was kind of the first time I actually met him in person. But actually check out the Platform Con live stream, which is on the Cloud Therapist channel, if you want a little bit more detail and kind of get to know Steve a little bit more as well outside of this particular video. But yeah, I've known Steve, I think through a mutual friend, Saim Safdar. So hello to Saim. And yeah, so I've known Steve for some time now. I think Steve has some great broad knowledge as well. So I thought it would be really cool to kind of invite him for this August episode of Class Data Play. Yeah, maybe just to us to do the usual of going through the three more topics for you. So no pressure, Steve. Hopefully you'll be able to enjoy this particular episode. So welcome, first of all, to Cloud Therapist channel. I think this is your first time. Yeah, so give us a quick maybe intro to yourself and also to Octopus Deploy, please.
Yeah, sure. And hopefully I can step into Paul's shoes and deliver on the goods on this one. So I'll do my best. My name's Steve and I work at Octopus Deploy. We are a company who help people do complex deployments at scale. So if you're deploying to lots of physical locations or tenanted deployments and lots of different regions, if your deployments are getting complicated, that's what we kind of do. So as part of that, we're involved in DevOps and continuous delivery and cloud native communities because that's kind of the people who have got all the knowledge that we're interested in hearing all those stories. So, and that's kind of where we met through those activities through the CNCF.
Fantastic. Yeah, indeed. Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you for that. So, hopefully we're going to have good fun. So again, as usual, we picked three topics to go through. So Steve and I have kind of been going back and forth on the topics and so on. So we've kind of prepared three more interesting topics for you. So those topics are for this month. The first one is the GitOps Report 2025 from Octopus Deploy. So Steve will be diving into that and giving us some insights about GitOps, the report itself, and kind of what were some of their findings and so on. The second topic that we have is called Know Your Kubernetes API protocols. There's actually a ton of them, as Steve and I have been researching and finding out. But there's a really good, interesting article or post on LinkedIn in regards to these protocols. So I thought it would be really good to kind of highlight both the post, which is a good effort, and also some of the protocols as well. So we'll go through that as our second topic. And the third one is a post, again on LinkedIn, called Your Moonshot Doesn't Have to Be a Moonshot. We'll go into a little bit more detail about what that means and everything else. But before we do that, here's a channel message for you. Did you know that 80% of you watching right now aren't subscribed yet to this channel? Come on, guys, we can do better, surely. So please hit subscribe and the notification bell. It costs nothing, but it really helps me to keep making more videos for you. All right, back to the therapy session. Okay, so let's pick up on the first of our topics, and this is the GitOps Report 2025. Steve, I know you've been right smack in the middle of this, so I will let you maybe kind of do a quick intro to the report itself, why you guys are kind of, compiled it, and maybe also just, yeah, some of the kind of, questions that you guys asked in the report itself, and then we'll kind of dive a little bit deeper into it.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a huge fan of research in software delivery. I've been following the State of DevOps report for forever. I think it's brilliant that we're actually digging in and testing to see what works and trying to understand it better. I remember when I was first starting out, there were lots of really knowledgeable individuals who'd
Hmm.
been doing software forever, and we were like listening in, right, to Barbara Liskov and Kent Beck and all these greats of software delivery,
Right.
and they would tell us what worked for them. But now we're kind of moved to the next stage where we're like, let's test whether that thing does help us achieve the things that we want to achieve.
Right.
So I'm a huge fan of all of that effort, and I think it's like a new era for software where we're going to test those ideas out, which I think is very cool. And as part of that, I had an opportunity to delve into GitOps, which hasn't really been looked at in that level of detail yet.
Mm.
So we went out, we recruited as many people as we could to complete our survey. Got 660 responses, and we're super grateful to all of the people that gave us responses, because without that, we wouldn't have been able to work out all of these statistical relationships.
Mm.
And we dug in to find out. We were asking questions like, what specific practices are they doing for GitOps? Most people are like using version control, but are they using the other practices that we associate with GitOps, like the
Mm.
automatic pull and continuous reconciliation? And we wanted to know what tools they were using, how they define success.
Mm.
What does success mean in GitOps? And whether they were actually getting those success criteria. Was that what they got in return for GitOps?
Right.
So yeah, we got to kind of look at this whole broad thing. I learned loads. Like I thought I knew what GitOps was, and then when we
Right.
started like interviewing people and doing surveys,
Yeah.
I was like, it turned everything on its head, and it was just surprises at every turn.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's. I mean, you're quite right, and maybe the initial sort of challenge for people is actually understanding what GitOps is and where it actually fits in. And I've still not really got my head fully around kind of that. And again, and I've actually stood up and presented on it, to DevOps people and so on. But so yeah, I understand the kind of the concepts and so on, kind of the tooling and kind of the flow and things like that. But yes, there is a lot more to that. So what was kind of oh sorry, and so just before we do that, so this came out in June, is that right, Steve?
That's right.
The
Yeah,
report?
the survey finished a little while before that. It took us a
Yeah.
long time to actually analyze it. I
Hmm.
learned Python and pandas and
Right.
all these libraries along the way to actually
Yeah.
get really deep into the data. So
Yeah.
that's been really fun as well.
Right. Right. Okay. And so you didn't use any Gen AI or anything to kind of
Um,
help you along the
I
way?
I admit Claude did help me with
Right.
my background is a lot in C sharp.
Yeah.
And in C sharp, naming conventions are really solid. Like you can start typing and autocomplete will just help you anyway.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
With
Yeah.
Python, trying to remember, because there's abbreviations and sometimes words are separated with an underscore and sometimes
Hmm.
they're not. And
Right.
arguments seem to be in completely random orders. So I used Claude to constantly look up what's the name of this function,
Right.
what's the arguments I need to pass.
Right.
So
Fabulous. So you really kind of use Gen AI in the way that it should be used as a sort of a helper for you and augment you. Excellent. Okay, and the report is done in association with CodeFresh, I believe. Is that correct?
that's right. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so what was kind of the main aim of the report? What were you guys kind of trying to really get out of the report? Not just kind of necessarily the results, but kind of just the overall goal.
Yeah, we quite a lot of our inspiration came from there's a CNCF working group around this,
Hmm.
and they created the open GitOps principles.
Hmm.
Um, and we wanted to kind of test those and see if those principles made a difference. Sometimes you can have like a list of like these are requirements, and when you test
Yeah.
them, you find out that half of them aren't needed, and maybe there's some other things that are missing. So that was one of our inspirations was to test that.
Right.
And we wanted to work out like what were the controls if we tried to do things in a slightly different way, what would the outcomes be?
Right.
And yeah, I think we had about 16 separate hypotheses that we wanted to test.
Right.
And like we didn't go through and tick them all off afterwards. There were some that surprised us, and we were like, well, that's inconclusive, or that's the opposite of what we thought. But that's what we wanted to find out is like, can we actually say with certainty this is what good GitOps looks like, as
Right.
opposed to partial or, like different flavors that may not get you the benefits.
Sure. Okay. And yeah, and you said over 660 respondents to that. What were kind of some of the roles that you asked? Were they mainly kind of the people you surveyed? Were they mainly sort of developers or
Yeah,
platform
the
engineers
common
or?
roles we had cloud infrastructure engineers,
Mhm.
DevOps engineers, developers, architects. There was like a whole range of technical roles. We did also get some responses from like senior execs and other
Mhm.
people who were involved in that GitOps process. And when we did the interviews, we were interested in speaking to some of those senior roles to find out if they're sponsoring people adopting GitOps, what were they
Right.
hoping to get for it as well?
Okay. So that's kind of more from the strategy side as well, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's like, why are we paying for this?
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Okay. All right. And kind of just again, broadly, just some of the questions that you guys asked, what were kind of some of the areas that you sort of dived into?
Yeah, so one of them was in adoption. We were asking, we didn't want to just say, are you using GitOps?
Hmm.
Because from the conversations we've been having already, like most people are using it somewhere.
Right.
So we actually asked people to give us an idea of how broad that adoption was, like how much of their production system is using GitOps.
Hmm.
And what we found is there's like a lot of people are quite early days in that kind of
Right.
0 to 20% range.
Right.
But there's also then people spread quite neatly out throughout the rest of it. So there are some people that are all in 100%,
Yeah.
everything is GitOps, and then everything in between. But that 0 to 20 was a bigger collection where people are just, they've kind of realized that this is a thing, and they're hearing people being successful with it. So they want to know, like, how do we get in on this? So they're trying it out at the moment. That was quite common. And then we kind of wanted to map that through.
Yeah.
So now we know they're using some GitOps. We wanted to kind of say which specific practices are you using? Are you using declarative or imperative configuration?
Yeah.
Because the principles say that you should use declarative
Mhm.
configuration. And then are you automatically pulling that and continuously reconciling it? Because some folks, they don't actually do continuous reconciliation. Maybe they
Mhm.
just do an alert and say something's changed, but I didn't want
Right.
to like put it back to where it should be
Right.
because like maybe we're not confident with the process yet.
Yeah.
So we wanted to dig in around that. And then follow that all the way through to if the benefits are things like better security
Yeah.
and easier audits and less production access, access rights, were they getting those things? So that was how we could kind of validate back, if you adopt GitOps, will you get the benefits if you only pick 3 of the things that we found that you need, or do you need all 6 of the things that we found?
Right. Right. Okay. And you've written also a blog in regards to this. So I think you posted on LinkedIn as well about it. With some interesting areas. I think you covered sort of 4 key findings. I think in your blog, you mentioned things like better software delivery, increased reliability, security and compliance, and adoption of obviously as well. Overall is increasing. So
Yes.
what were kind of what were your thoughts around those 4 sort of key findings?
Yeah, so I mean, interestingly, this one's probably quite predictable. The more practices that you pick up and get good at, because you don't necessarily get the benefit on day one. Sometimes you need a bit of practice.
Hmm.
But the more of those practices you pick up, the more likely you'll get those outcomes that you want from GitOps, which is
Right.
around that kind of, having less people who need admin access is a classic one. The number of
Right.
times I've worked somewhere, and if something changes, you're like, who changed that? And it's like, well, 50 people can access this. Like, so any one of them could have done,
Right.
kubectl change
Yes.
something,
Yeah.
it's going to take us a while to track it down. So, like solving those problems happens way more once you've implemented the practices. And the people that are doing this and getting the benefits, they want to increase their adoption. So,
Mm.
like 93% of the people we surveyed wanted to increase the amount of GitOps that they have in their organization. And a very tiny percentage wanted to reduce it. They were like, actually, maybe it's not for us.
Mm.
Um, but we found that those that want to reduce it are very often the ones who aren't doing continuous reconciliation,
Right.
which is like that's like the key to unlocking the benefit. So
I see.
it's almost like they've done all this hard work, but they haven't done the piece that's going to make it pay back, and now they're thinking of retreating.
Right.
So like our message to all of those people is just take another couple of steps forward,
Yeah.
and you're going to
Yes.
get to the point where
You'll
it's
get
going
the
to work for you.
benefits. Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Yeah. I'm not, I think, like I said, yeah, it's actually interesting that you guys have kind of just dived into the nuances a little bit. And I think you mentioned that in your blog post as well. You're kind of distinguishing, I think you said, between the breadth, which is kind of the extent across production systems, and the depth, which is how many practices are implemented and how
Yeah.
well they're implemented. So that's interesting because you describe the process, and there's actually a diagram in your blog as well. So I'll make that available. Hopefully you can see that on the screen or somewhere. But that also kind of showed you the various aspects of sort of the process itself. And it's good that you've kind of dived a little bit deeper, right, into those and kind of actually said, yeah, are you, once you do your commits, are you actually doing the reconciliation or not, for example? Are you, doing this other aspect of it or not, the declarative aspect and whatever? And I think that's probably quite important because, like I said, I'm still trying to get my head around kind of, where it fits in and how it works and how would it kind of, how would that sort of tooling really fits in with your normal sort of CI/CD tooling and so on as well. So I think that's actually quite good. Okay,
Yeah.
were there any findings that actually surprised you?
Yeah, there's quite a big one. We looked at the relationship between each individual practice and each individual outcome to try and work out. We were trying to work out basically, can we throw any of these away? That was like the goal. If you're like, can we simplify this down? And what we found was different practices, so like human readable formats, help different outcomes than declarative desired state. So they do seem to be like covering gaps in other practices, which is interesting. So it's like a supporting set of ideas. But the surprise one in here is, and we asked this question only because in GitOps you're storing this stuff in version control.
Right.
We just asked, and we weren't expecting this to be a big finding. We just wanted to know how long it took people to get a code review approved.
Right.
Because we just thought that would be interesting information. What we found was code review speed is unlocking so much value. If you're doing GitOps but you have slow code reviews, you're actually stopping the benefits from accruing. Because if I have to wait 3 days for it to be approved, but I've put the change in because we have a problem that I'm trying to resolve, I'm being pushed to go and do it ClickOps style, right? Because I can't wait 3 days. So unless you have that speedy code review as part of your engineering kind of process, you're going to force people back down the ClickOps route. So you'll only be getting the benefit for your less urgent changes, and your urgent changes will all be missing from the audit logs, and they won't have been checked by anyone else, which means they'll be more likely to cause a knock-on problem.
Right.
And it'll be harder to understand the changes. And the next time there's an incident, you can't look back and see what you did before to solve it. So it's like you lose so many things. So that, responsive code review is like a huge modifier of all of the good stuff.
Okay, so that's kind of trying to, I guess the idea or the outcome of that's trying to kind of bring that a little bit closer to, or increasing, decreasing that time, shall we say, for the code review, so that, there isn't a gap between while that's happening, something else happens in the infrastructure. You got to go and sort that out by whatever means you're going to do that. and that change might actually affect what you just committed and is being reviewed right now. So by the time it's actually ready to go, hang on, there's still another problem, right? Because the code, the infrastructure's changed, and it may not kind of be exactly what this new code that you're about to deploy is expecting, right?
Yeah, I
so that
suppose a good example
defeats the object of what you're trying to do.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like the classic example would be, you've got unanticipated demand, right? Maybe you've advertised something and the adverts worked way better than you thought. So now there's this like increase in demand, and like you just want to increase your pods, right? Let's have more pods. We can easily deal with this demand. So if you can go in and make a change to increase the number of pods, commit it, someone approves it, it then updates your infrastructure, you now have all of that record of what's just happened. So if you ever have more demand in the future, your colleague can go and have a look. Oh, this happened before. Let's have a look at how they solved it. Oh, look, they just increased the pods of this service, and that was enough to solve it. So that knowledge is there. Plus, like you actually have the audit trail to show that you've increased them, and then it will show the decrease again when the peak is passed, because you'll put another change through. And it's like, if you can just make your version control your control plane for it all, it just, everything that it collects is then available instead of it being like a partial picture.
Right. Yeah, excellent. And your blog, you also mentioned that the actual report itself, dives sort of deeper and takes a bit of a diversion into actually GitOps itself as a technology. You say that a significant part of the report introduces the GitOps model itself, outlining 6 practices that are kind of necessary for successful adoption. So these include things like declarative desired state, human readable format, responsive code reviews, version control, as you said, automatic pull of the updates, and continuous reconciliation as well. So what is the kind of benefit for folks, reading this, whether they're developers or the actual organization? What is the report going to help them with going forward, Steve?
So hopefully it will help them look at their current GitOps process, or if they're thinking of adopting it, thinking of that process they're going to introduce, and maybe do it just a bit better, right? So if you're one of the organizations that are missing some of these pieces, you might then see, oh yeah, we're missing those benefits as well. Oh, we could close that gap quite easily if we introduce this one extra practice. So it's all part of that improvement process. Teams can kind of take this and just make their GitOps that next level up, where they're going to get so much more value from their investment.
Right.
And yeah, I suppose I'd kind of talk about that continuous reconciliation. For me, that's the real beating heart of the whole GitOps process.
Yeah.
But it's also really commonly absent. And it's just that either there's fear there, or it's like maybe people are getting all of the other things in place before they're ready to do that. But it's definitely a point we want everyone to get to, is like get that continuous reconciliation happening. I remember when I used to work on databases, we had this same journey, because databases, you used to handcraft them, right? You'd update your development environment. And when you needed to promote a test, there'd be this thing of trying to make the test database look like the dev database. And it was hard work to try and get that to flow through.
Yeah.
So we created projects to do this, right? It was like database as code. And then we define the schema, and our dev and our test and our production get automatically updated. If I go in and I tweak something by hand, it gets completely wiped out back to where it should be by that automated process. And when that starts happening, there's really good motivation for you to make the change in the project, not directly to the database. And that's what we want for infrastructure as well, that same solid way of working.
Cool. And for those folks who are kind of looking, to adopt GitOps, it's kind of peering through some of these areas of the report, as you said, diving, deeper into the different aspects of GitOps. This could be also motivational for them to actually start looking seriously at development, thinking, actually, it's not really that bad. Maybe we can kind of, slowly adopt some of the aspects of GitOps and start bringing in some of these tooling as well.
Yeah, and they will have done something similar before.
Mm.
Depending on how old they are. Not everyone's as old as I am, so
Yeah,
like they may not have experienced it, but like when we were adopting version control, it was a bind at first because it was a different way of working.
yeah,
But then like 2 weeks later, you're like, why did we ever work without this? And
right.
like each of these practices,
Yeah,
throughout my career, the database upgrades,
yeah,
the deployment automation, monitoring, like they're a pain to kind of get going with, but then like you realize just how hard it was before you had them, and like the amount of waste that you had when you were having to try and work stuff out without those tools. So it's definitely worth the investment, and it's not just for Kubernetes. Obviously, that's one of the biggest areas where people are using it, but there are people using this for other things as well.
mm.
They just have to use a slightly different technology, whether it's like ARM templates or Terraform or something else. It can be, you can find ways of applying it to other technologies.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Yes. I don't think it's kind of, yeah, people shouldn't kind of think of it as just kind of being for that sort of specific code deployment type of flow. There's other ways that you can certainly get into as well. So Steve, listen, I'd love to get into this a little bit more, and maybe we'll probably end up doing a different talk on this as well. It's kind of, things like where does kind of GitOps fit into the DevOps process? Kind of trying to position it. Can it help with things like platform engineering? Processor tool and things like that. And also, you guys have announced the Platform Hub recently as well. So again, maybe we need to kind of pick up on that. So just briefly on that, is that kind of a sort of like a platform engineering studio type of thing? What is that kind of idea behind
Yeah,
Platform
this
Hub?
is this is super cool. I'm really excited by this because I've been finding ways to try and achieve what Platform Hub does without it. And so this is a classic platform engineering problem that you want
Yeah,
to create a template. And then usually what happens with your template is it gets cloned out to a bunch of places. And then you come up with a genius improvement to your template. And then you're like chasing around everywhere the template's been cloned to try and bring them all up to
right.
that standard.
Yeah,
And it's like it's not just templates, it's policies and it's that whole piece. And what like my deep belief is that um, the platform engineering team have got a lot on their plate. Like
right.
effectively what we did is we took all of the complexity that we didn't want to deal with and we kind of gave it to them and like good luck, enjoy
Mm,
all of that complexity. So what we need is for tools to take some of that burden.
yeah,
So instead of the platform engineering team having to work out how to create templates, get them in use, keep them
right,
updated, all of that good stuff, the tools need to take that heavy lifting, make it so the platform team can focus more on what should be in the template, what policies do we need to adhere to as a company. And so it's like, I think Gregor says this a lot in his talks. It's got the concept of a floating platform.
mm,
And the idea is you keep your platform thin by pushing that complexity down into the tools where you can.
right.
So this is like, we're hoping that this is like a gift to all of those platform engineering teams where we can say, we've solved these problems for you. So now you can focus more on those contextual issues that your organization has that we can't solve because that's mapping your complex organization into this world is the job of platform engineering. So
Cool.
yeah, I hope it
Excellent.
helps.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure it will, because I think anything kind of thrown into that sort of PE space is really, it's really going to be useful. Okay, so more info on the GitOps report itself. Link is in the description of this video. Description of Platform Hub. Links again to the blogs around that from Octopus Deploy. All in the description of this video. Do check that out, please. And yeah, and where to get the report, of course, and someone will all be there as well. Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. So our second topic is know your Kubernetes API protocols. And there's quite a few of them. So again, this was a LinkedIn post that I picked up from a guy called Said. I think he just identifies himself as Said. He is I think he works for Google. He's a senior security engineer. He's London-based, apparently, according to his LinkedIn profile. And Said's kind of given us oh yes, and he's I'm going to struggle struggled to pronounce this. He's a kubestronaut as well. So I think that's kind of the highest recognized by the Cloud Native Computing Foundation for achieving, achieving mastery in Kubernetes and cloud native technologies and passing all 5 core Kubernetes certifications. So sit up and listen on this one, guys. This one's going to be interesting. Okay. So he's kind of he lists out 9 protocols. We'll go through some of those here. We're not going to be able to do the whole thing sort of justice or the list of protocols themselves, but he's kind of answers the question of why API protocols matter in Kubernetes. And he says, and I quote, the Kubernetes is all about orchestrating distributed systems. Knowing the right API protocol for communication between components, services, external systems, and so on can make your architecture faster, more reliable, and scalable. I think that's a fair comment. Understanding the protocols lets you also choose the right communications model for your services that you want to run, kind of build scalable apps and extend them and customize them and so on. So Steve, we thought, what did we say? We said we'll kind of maybe pick on a few of these. Let me kind of list out the 9. There's also a sort of an animated graphic in the post itself. So hopefully you'll see that here somewhere, or maybe I'll just put it in the link of the description of the video. But the protocols include REST, gRPC, GraphQL, SOAP, WebSockets, MQTT, webhooks, server sent events or SSE, and AMQP. So Steve, we said we will pick on a few of these, but just kind of what was your initial thought on the post itself?
Yeah, it's really useful because we talked a lot about this kind of thing 20 years ago, right? When SaaS was becoming a big thing. And the solution at the time was really things like SOAP or the kind of WC kind of star protocols for communicating between services. And over time, we just realized that they were kind of too heavy. These giant XML messages inside of a substantial envelope was not the right way to go. And so for a while, like REST kind of took over the world.
Yeah.
But it's interesting now that even JSON is too big, right, for some of the stuff we want to do. And I think that's despite computers getting more powerful and networks getting, being able to send more data, we're still looking to squeeze more out of them all, right? Technologies like gRPC, where it's like, can we make this thing smaller, even smaller still? So I love that we're still innovating so much in that area. And then we read about this on a web page, which is like 20 megabytes, which is kind of funny.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, yeah, you're right. And kind of, I mean, I remember SOAP and stuff like that from many moons ago. And you're right in terms of kind of JSON kind of, came in and took over for a while. REST kind of maybe followed or was around that sort of same time as well. And that kind of, I think kind of for that sort of webby based sort of approach to doing things when you're kind of plush and you've got millions lines of Java code or whatever it is, and you're kind of resting on the couch kind of application. You're not really in kind of in a hurry to do much, or you're kind of event driven or something like that. Maybe that's kind of where REST would be kind of the sort of approach to that. But you're right in terms of things like service mesh and WebAssembly, God forbid, and stuff like that, all these kind of exotic and kind of more, later stuff. Yeah, you do need a very sort of nippy, very light type of protocol for communication. So things like gRPC and so on would come into that. But also we're seeing things like GraphQL as well. So that's actually described as a flexible query-based API for precise data fetching. So in terms of relevance for Kubernetes, less common in the core, but used in the developer portals, dashboards, and front-end apps as well. And then the article again, or the post mentions that why it matters. So it's useful for when building UIs and APIs for teams. and that consume Kubernetes data. So that's, again, kind of more the latest stuff, would you say? Is that kind of come in a little bit more recently?
Yeah, I kind of like both REST and GraphQL have got this thing where they're trying to make it super easy to get the thing you need. So with REST, pretty much every response you get back has got like pointers to the next resource that you might need. So you don't need to read the documentation and say, oh, I've got a list. If I take the ID, I can call this endpoint and pass in that ID. You don't need to even ask that because a lot of those resource URLs are just part of the response,
Right.
which is genius, right? It's like hypertext for APIs, which is cool. And GraphQL, like the idea should be here that I no longer have to look at extensive documentation to understand how to get the thing I need because there are conventions around it. So
Right.
I can now, if I'm calling lots of different GraphQL endpoints, a lot of that knowledge is transferable between them instead of it being bespoke, right? When you used to have to call an API to get something back, you would have to look at the documentation to see what have they called like skipping, and what have they called filtering, and what have they called that. It's like, well, let's actually standardize some of this stuff, make it easier.
Right. Yeah. So that would, I guess, that would kind of, if the same sort of parameters that you need or the same way of coding something that you need, would be the same or similar, between those sort of calls, then I guess that does make it easier for us to copy and paste and then kind of make a few changes in the code as a developer.
Yeah, a bit more intuitive.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, yeah. So we said kind of REST is there, and again, the article describes REST as a kind of a stateless, resource-oriented HTTP protocol. Relevance for Kubernetes says it's API. Kubernetes API itself is a RESTful API. So most controllers, CLIs, and operators interact with the cluster in this way. And why it matters, again, understanding REST is foundational. Makes sense. Kubernetes API is reliant on that, so that's important. gRPC says high-performance binary protocol for using protocol buffers. So again, relevance is that gRPC is widely used in the Kubernetes ecosystem. It is because I've seen it quite a lot. It's actually within, I think, the inner workings of Kubernetes, so the database etcd and all that. But also, as we said, things like in a service meshes like Istio and various other ones are actually using that. And again, it says why it matters. Knowing gRPC helps to build microservices and using tools like service mesh within Kubernetes as well. So these are all really interesting kind of decisions that developers have to make, but also equally with their infrastructure colleagues as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting because gRPC, I first came across that in the site reliability engineering book, where they talk a little bit about their motivation for creating this, because microservices really are a big driver for this, because in the olden times, we always used to say, be chunky, not chatty. Right. So it's like, if you can send a single payload with everything that someone
needs in it,
that's better than kind of giving them a bit and then they ask for a bit more and you give a bit more, and that back and forth was seen as being a big problem. But microservices are all about that chat, right? There's a lot of stuff going on, and when you're doing that at scale, like REST works for a bit here, but when you're at scale, the number of messages is stunning. Then you do want something that is as light as it can be, and that's the idea behind this. Is you don't have to wait for a serializer, you don't have to wait for a deserializer. You are just sending the binary data straight down the pipe. So yeah, it's cutting off a translation at both ends, which is a useful optimization.
Right.
Oversimplifying it, and I apologize to the engineers who created it for describing it in such way.
I'm sure they'll be fine with that. We haven't got that much time to delve deeper into it anyway. Okay, so the other one of my favorites, I think, is I just like the sound of it, is the webhooks, I think. So this one used for admission controller, CI/CD integration, and GitOps triggers as well, Steve. So
yes,
right up your street. So that's cool.
Yeah, they're great because it's all about responding to events.
Right.
I think almost everyone has come across webhooks in a tool like Slack, where
Yeah.
you can you have something happening in one of your systems, and you can use a webhook to kind of fire that message into your chat app so that you can kind of get updates. The build has just failed is a
Right.
classic one, right?
Classic one, yes, absolutely. Yeah, and this says what matters again. Kubernetes uses webhooks for extending API behavior dynamically as well. So again, that's kind of if you want to extend Kubernetes and maybe add your own tricks into that and stuff that's specific to your cluster and the service you want to run, then obviously that's the way to do it. I've actually seen the other point is when I do some of these kind of in-person meetups, a lot of the guys are kind of demonstrating something or whatever and say, yeah, so I did this Go thing and I used webhooks to, get it all gelled together and so on. So it's kind of quite common in that sort of developer experimentation sort of space as well, especially around containers and so on. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Excellent. Okay, so like I said, the list is quite extensive. There's 9 in there that Said has actually listed in his post. But I thought it would be quite interesting to ask ChatGPT what other protocols are around as well. So it kind of went on a bit of a bender around sort of listing those out for me as well. So so did that kind of larger list. And there was things like the NATS protocol, Kafka, something called Stomp, which was simple text-oriented messaging protocol, quite interesting. Another one called COAP, C-O-A-P, gRPC Web, so that's a different version. Quick, QUIC, ZeroMQ, usual FTP, SFTP, etc. Our beloved TCP/IP and UDP and so on were all listed as well. So there's clearly a lot more to the picture, but this I think post is really good. Yes, it makes you aware of the protocols, as we said, right, Steve? And it also gives you that kind of thinking as well that you need to do when you're sort of developing these things, and also working with, as I said, your kind of maybe infrastructure colleagues in terms of what's the best way to kind of approach these things, right? Excellent. Okay, yeah, and it also, I think the last thing was on that it actually kind of clustered the protocols as well. So there was like a request response API, streaming sort of protocols, messaging protocols, eventing and webhooks protocols, and then sort of more IoT lightweight protocols as well. So really, basically, it's a whole mess. But then you kind of, as a developer, you're going to have to go through all of that yourself, and as we said, figure out what's the best ones to actually use, depending on the services that you're trying to deploy as well. Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. Cool. So let's move on to the third of our topics. So this one's called Your Moonshot Doesn't Have to Be a Moonshot. Now, again, as we said, this is a post on LinkedIn from a chap called David Knott. Now, David describes himself as the CTO for the UK government. Now, I didn't know that the UK government required a CTO specifically. Maybe there's more of them than just David, but I don't know. I couldn't really tell from the article or his LinkedIn profile. But yeah, so that article, I think, what was your main take on the article? Where is it trying to get to, Steve? What was your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I like it's basically a metaphor. And I have to say as well, I bet with that job role, you get an amazing office.
I hope so.
But the article has this
overlooking
metaphor.
Parliament or
Yeah, that's right.
the river,
Yeah.
Thames River, at least, kind of something like that. Yeah,
plush. So yeah, it talks about it does a comparison with sending the Apollo mission into space.
Right.
And when you're sending an object a great distance, you can't kind of change the batteries if you need to, or replace a broken part. It's once you fire it off, it's like very difficult to change it.
Yeah.
And there have been some interesting stories on this actually recently with some of their very long range space missions where they found a problem and then they've found creative ways of like course correcting something that was
to
never
get around it.
designed to take
Yeah,
that instruction.
yeah,
It's like it's kind of amazing. They kind of find ways around it. But on the whole, if it's got a solar panel on it and something
mm,
goes wrong, that solar panel is then just gone and
yeah,
it could be mission over.
yeah,
Um, and he's talking about how big projects are a bit like this, where the things that you choose to use at the start of the project um, are not the things you would choose by the time you complete the project,
mm,
which is highly interesting. And I suppose the message in this article is that you should be designing so that things are a bit more flexible because hopefully, you haven't fired your code into space and you can still edit it now.
yeah.
So it should be easy for you to change things.
Right.
So that's the general picture that I got from it.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of, it's asking the question of, do you use when you're embarking on something new, a new project? And as we said here, he's kind of leaning heavily into the NASA Apollo missions, and the analogy I think that he makes there is, or the example he mentions there is, NASA choosing sort of I presume kind of the old valves, kind of approach versus transistors, which obviously is kind of the beginnings of microchips and so on. And NASA at the time, this is kind of the early 60s. And obviously they were planning ahead, 6, 7, 8 years, 10 years, whatever, planning ahead. They chose transistors. So they kind of maybe took a bit of a gamble,
Yeah, because
on
this
that.
was brand new,
Yeah, it
right?
was
It was
relatively
like we're
new stuff.
choosing the latest, most amazing thing right
Yeah,
now that may not have been tested as much.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's kind of, I think that's what the example anyway in the in the article is talking about, and I think it's kind of trying to equate it to when we choose systems. When we're kind of at the point of making decisions, what is available to us? What are the kind of choices we can make? And then maybe trying to, once we kind of maybe settle on, not necessarily 100% decide yet on one system or another, or one type of tech or another, but maybe just during that process or toward the end of that process, kind of projecting that into the future, saying, will this be around in kind of 5 years, 10 years time? What kind of adjustments we may have to make, as you said, if there's problems or failures or upgrades or new stuff comes along that we're not expecting, and and things like that. So for me, I thought the original thought is interesting, because you do have to do that, even when you're actually kind of saying, we want to migrate to cloud. Okay, so you're going to migrate to cloud. You're going to take all your apps into, let's say, a public cloud or something. But what does that roadmap look like? You can't just kind of, obviously not going to be able to do that over the weekend. So is it kind of a 3-year thing you're looking at, 5 years kind of thing, 10-year sort of approach that you're looking at? So you do have to kind of consider this type of thinking, I think, in many other ways, not just choosing the right systems, but also in things like, migration, choosing, Kubernetes, for example, as your kind of orchestrator, to do, containers and things like that, versus maybe some other ways of doing that. And also maybe kind of where that would sit. Do you kind of, I mean, you could do all of that in your data center if you really want to, right? You could run your Kubernetes on top of whatever, or bare metal and so on. Or actually, would maybe one of the XKS services in the public cloud, like AKS, EKS, GKE, and so on, would actually maybe be a better choice? Because again, you could look at longevity with those. I'm sure that Google and Amazon will be around in 5 years and 10 years. I hope so anyway.
They're certainly planning on it.
Yeah, they're certainly planning on it. Exactly, right? So, so maybe those XKS kind of, services is a better decision to make, a much more sound kind of decision to make. So, like I said, I like that aspect of it. The only thing that I didn't really like was the point that we're saying choosing, or we get to build computer systems, and my point there was, do we still? Maybe the UK government still does, for whatever reason, compliance and sovereignty and various other things. But the rest of us have moved to cloud computing. And the whole point of cloud computing, and cloud native more specifically, is to really abstract ourselves from the tin, from the hardware. So we're no longer caring about exactly those types of changes that may happen. And again, we've seen that recently, right, Steve? So we've seen with the move from kind of Intel and AMD to ARM-based technology. And again, if I'm doing something and I can do that on a on an ARM virtual machine or run my Kubernetes cluster on an ARM sort of instance, what do I care? What it is and whatever. It looks cheaper, it runs just as fast and whatever. Hey, let me make a use of that. And if that's an ARM design or an Intel design, what do I care?
Yeah, that's really like, this is the dream, right? Is that we want to be able to express our code once. And if we need to put it through a compiler to get an ARM version of it instead of a,
x86
or whatever, like that should be it. It should be such a simple thing. We shouldn't have to design our entire system to be that tightly coupled to that that kind of infrastructure decision. And that, I suppose, that's what we've been chasing for a long time. Like ever since COBOL was designed to be a language that would work on different machines, right? It was like a huge step forward because now I can write the same syntax and I can run it in more than one place, which was like a revolution, I suppose, at the time. Now you would be unsurprised because if a language only works on one system, you probably wouldn't choose to use it. So yeah, I kind of think the great decoupling, we just want to be able to express the behavior of the system that we want, and we don't want to have to make that depend on where we're running it. I am at the stage where I don't even want to create different apps for different systems, right? I'm like, so can I use the web to do this so that it will work on all of the systems? It'll work on my mobile phone, no matter which flavor of phone I've chosen. It'll work on my desktop, whichever flavor of desktop I've chosen.
AI agents, Steve. AI agents. That's all I can say. No, but I mean, really, like I said, I like the sort of the concept and kind of to make you think about that. And like I said, in certain areas, I think it's still a valid thing to do. Like I said, in migrations, for example, or I don't know, choosing databases or whatever. There's a lot kind of all the rage about vector databases and whatever. But actually, is that really going to cut it in 5 years? Will there be something better and people will just move on? And is that actually the right choice for me anyway? And or sort of the traditional RDBMS is still kind of king, and for the type of stuff that I want to do, maybe the type of business I am, the type of service I want to offer. So that side of it, great. But the kind of, as you said, coupling it with computer systems, it kind of almost gave me a heart attack when I read that. I was like, back to actually hardware? What do you mean?
Yeah.
We're cloud native
Crossy
these
roads
days.
because in Crossy roads, the cars going in different directions at different speeds.
Yeah.
And like databases change slower than, our choice of virtualization. And virtualization moves a bit slower than language preference, and language preference moves a little bit slower than front-end frameworks,
right?
which seem to be incredibly quick. That's so short-lived. So like there's different speeds to these things, which means that they represent kind of different levels of decision. Like, when you choose a database, it is probably for 5 to 10 years.
Yes.
When you choose a front-end framework, it is literally until the next season.
Yes.
And something cooler comes along.
Yes, and then the next developer you hire goes, no, I don't do that. I do this one here.
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of funny. It's like, Angular? Man, that's so old school.
Yeah, I know, exactly. That's just gone out of fashion, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's kind of, like I said, the concept is, I think, sound and kind of does say, it's appealing to the right things there and kind of making you think. But I think the example maybe is not necessarily the best one. I don't know if NASA actually puts Kubernetes yet on their space probes, but we'll see. I'm sure it's running Linux these days. I'm sure they've been running Linux for a couple of decades now, but Kubernetes, I don't know yet.
I know that the Argo Octopus is ready for that because it already wears like a little space helmet, doesn't it?
That's true. That's true.
So it's ready to go. It just is waiting for the green light from mission control.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, I guess, like I said, and we were kind of just saying before we kicked off the recording, sort of for maybe government sort of based projects, like I said, there is already an anchor there that's required because of regulation and sovereignty of data and stuff like that. That's already there, and maybe their projects do take longer to do anyway to achieve. So because one of the things that the article again said was, you make the choice today, and by the time you go into production, is that choice still valid? As well as kind of 5 years, 10 years as well. So we said kind of
one, isn't it?
Well, exactly. Things like HS2 is taking decades and costing billions more than what it was actually designed to actually cost in the first place. So maybe for those types of projects, you do have to think a little bit more, and all the way down to the computer systems. Computer system choices that you actually make. There was something about ESA, the European Space Agency, Steve. What was that you were going to mention?
Yeah, I worked with a really smart chap who worked at the European Space Agency. I'm pretty sure there was not that long ago, they landed a space device on a flying kind of comet to try and work out what was going on.
Oh, yes,
right?
yes.
And he worked on that a long time ago. And of course, you kind of work on it and then you fire it into space and then your life moves on.
Yeah.
And then you read in the news whether or not your work
successful
came off, right? And I think it bounced, but it then, because the idea was when it hit the surface, it was supposed to fire like a harpoon in to stick on.
Yes.
And it bounced and didn't quite end up in the place they wanted, but did manage to get there.
Yeah, I think it ended up in the shadowy place.
Which is what they didn't want because of the solar panels.
Yeah, and they couldn't get the solar panels.
Not
enough power on the solar panels.
There's a huge problem with this kind of project because you can't put one of anything on there because it is going to get broken.
Right.
Either by space is not a very nice place to be. It kind of doesn't want you to survive there.
Slightly harsh.
Yeah, so you have to put more than one of everything in there, but you also can't put too many of everything in there because then it's too heavy and you can't get it where it needs to go.
Yes.
So they have these huge problems, and hopefully in software we don't have those problems so much.
Right.
The trade-offs aren't quite the same.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that most teams out there, most of the viewers listening to this, can complete a project before the technology goes obsolete.
Yes.
We're agile, we're DevOps.
Absolutely.
We're working in small batches, delivering frequently.
Absolutely.
And hopefully we're decoupled enough from some of those decisions that we could switch out a part of it. Like the thought of switching out a database 25 years ago would have been like unthinkable.
Yes.
But the way we design applications now means it's almost trivial. Maybe not trivial, but almost trivial.
Yes, exactly. I think I after I read the article, I was compelled to make a comment. So I don't know if David not actually asked the question directly in the article. I can't remember. But I just wrote one line on there and I just said, by abstracting from it, because essentially that is what we have done, with cloud computing. And that I don't think we can really underestimate how important that aspect is, and just being in a cloud computing environment, let alone doing things like cloud native and things like that as well. So I think that's all part of it.
But it's probably our biggest magic trick in the industry.
Absolutely.
Is creating that abstraction, and just it's a little layer of insulation keeping you safe from that churn underneath.
Yes, absolutely. Maybe not from the harshness of space, but
yes.
the coldness and the temperatures of space, but certainly from certainly from those kind of long-term decisions. And giving you that flexibility. That's Kubernetes has abstracted even further. Right now, with containers, we don't have to worry about virtual machines, don't have to worry about hypervisors. We can much more easily, migrate workloads. And some of the so-called cloud repatriation stories that I've heard, and people saying, "Oh yeah, these guys all moved all back to the data center." Well, not quite, because they're actually still running Kubernetes.
That's right.
They're just
you take
running
those
it
things with you back to
exactly.
To
it's not like they went back and compiled all those microservices back into a monolithic app of million lines of Java code and put it on top of vSphere again, from VMware. That's not a
Yeah.
cloud repatriation, mate.
Yeah, I think when those stories come out, they're not really about going back to anything.
Yeah.
They're always about going forward to a new place. I think
Yeah.
that's one of the mistakes people make when they're thinking about repatriation.
Absolutely.
Like,
Absolutely.
if you're an organization who has all of those skills in-house and you transfer things up to the cloud and then you learn a bunch of stuff and then you're like, let's move forward. We can still manage hardware. We still have the skills. There's an empty room over there with all of the fire systems and cooling, so
Right.
we don't have to do a big investment.
Yeah.
Like then we're all good, right? It's like that makes sense. But for a lot of organizations, having a team of people managing infrastructure is just maybe not the most efficient way of running the organization.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Well, anyway, check out the post. I think it's interesting. Link is in the description for you guys. So, Steve, we have come to the end of this episode.
oh
I know. All good things, as they say. So thank you very much, Steve. It's been really interesting to do these 3 topics with you. I hope you've enjoyed your first time on Cloud State of Play.
I absolutely have. Yeah, it's been a really interesting discussion, and I probably wouldn't have found that article if you hadn't have mentioned it, and it's really got the neurons firing.
Absolutely. I'm good at that. I'm good at that. Okay, so all the links to Steve, what he gets up to when he's not on Cloud State of Play, and Octopus Deploy, the fantastic GitOps article, the new stuff on Platform Hub and everything else is all in the description of this video, so go and check that out. Thank you all for watching. Please do the usual stuff of commenting, sharing, and liking. If you're doing any of these things, any of these things are kind of interest to you, please let us know. Drop us a comment. We'd really appreciate that. We will see you next time. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. You may also want to check out some of the other videos on this channel. Bye for now.